All right, so guys, really thank you for joining in. Can you guys hear me clearly? Just indicate in the chat if you can. Yes? Or fantastic.
Yes, hearing clearly.
Now, what is ransomware? Most persons would have heard the term. It would have been circulating in medias, in the media house, because of the type of attacks that are now being transmitted across not just the United States and the Caribbean, but right across the world. And especially now that persons are working from home. So ransomware is pretty simple. It's a type of malicious software designed to encrypt files on a computer in exchange for money. So you'll click on a link, it will be installed, it will execute, it will encrypt all the files on that particular computer, and then there'll be a demand for bitcoins, for monies to be exchanged in bitcoins, or your information will be lost, deleted, or exchanged on the dark web. And there are 3 known ransomwares that are listed below, and we'll go through some others as the webinar progresses. Next slide, please. So I've coined this particular slide Cybersecurity Truths. Cybersecurity for us and for persons in the industry, it's not a product. It's not a tool. It's not just a policy or a service, but it's a combination of all of these. It's a combination of everything. And what is it designed for? It's designed to protect your company's data. Now, gone are the days when antivirus would be adequate or is adequate to protect a company's device or company's infrastructure. You now have to put all these to ensure that you're adequately protected. Another truth, cybersecurity is not the responsibility of your security manager or the CISO or your CIO. It is everyone's responsibility. Everyone has a collective responsibility to ensure that their company's assets and data is protected. If you have a laptop and you're connected to your company's network, you have a responsibility to ensure that you're doing the responsible thing by not clicking on links, by not installing files that are potentially damaging, by not going to sites that are potentially damaging, downloading from torrent sites that could potentially launch malicious attacks on that company's computer, especially if your company does not necessarily have the budget or may not necessarily have the resource like large organizations to protect their environment. It takes one user, one click to bring an entire organization to its knees. Another truth, most small businesses are inadequately prepared for today's cyber threats. Why? Because they don't see themselves as a threat. But I'm going to show you a slide in the webinar of one company that thought that was the case, but they suffered irreparable damage as a result. Now, the other truth is, it's not a matter of if you will be hit. It's a matter of when you'll be hit. And especially now, with everyone working from home, all your attackers are now targeting those endpoints. And they have nothing else to do but to transmit and to continue the spread of these attacks. Next slide, please. Now, these are some stats that I'm sure you'd have all heard or seen. Some persons in the cybersecurity space, and I presume some CIOs would be well aware of these stats, but I'll go through some of them so it's front and center. There are 350,000 malware strains being created every single day. 350,000. And that is why your traditional signature-based antivirus is inadequately prepared to take on the current threats. It takes 197 days to identify a breach. Most persons would have already been infected. Their files would have already been exfiltrated. Those files already on the dark web before you potentially see a ransomware demand coming up, and you are not aware. You could potentially already be infected in your organization, and you are not aware if you have not employed proper cybersecurity posture in that organization. Another stat, it takes 69 days after breach has been found to adequately repair and respond to that breach. Now, what does that mean for your organization while you're repairing? It means that your customers, your loyal customers who would look to you for service, can no longer trust you for those services. It means that you would have already started to suffer reputational damage as a result of that breach. But there are other implications. There are lots of fines, whether it be GDPR, PCI, or other fines are now coming out in different jurisdictions that could render your business bankrupt if you are not putting adequate protections in place. What we are saying throughout this entire webinar, do not wait to do post-mortem assessment and post-mortem remediation. This needs to be done before. For small businesses, you're looking at over $200,000 or an average $200,000 to remediate. This is the cost of an average attack on a small business. For large businesses, it's estimated at currently $3.8 million. So we've been hearing a lot of talk from a lot of customers, and especially now. Before, there was not a budget. Now that they're seeing an increase of the phishing attacks on their organization, persons are now putting the budget in place because this is a real deal. 43% of all attacks are targeted towards small businesses. Why? Because a lot of those businesses are inadequately prepared. And 68% of all attacks are targeted towards endpoints. And especially with persons working from home, we are now moving from a secured infrastructure to a home Wi-Fi with basic protection. Those computers that are connecting to the public domain and VPNing, connecting to your network, those are prime targets for attackers. Next slide, please. Now, these are some of the breaches that I've pulled from 2019. There are others, but I want to go through these. Most of these are large enterprise companies and cities. Capital One, they had a misconfigured server. It took one person to bring Capital One to its knees. They've suffered significant damages as a result, millions of dollars in fines and reputational damage, and I would say as a result, their revenue fell as well. One person, misconfigured server that was vulnerable, brought them to their knees. The Weather Channel went down for 90 minutes in April of 2019. Ransomware, someone clicked on a link through a phishing email and it brought them down for 90 minutes. Now, the beauty with the Weather Channel, they had enough protection in place, so they're able to recover in 2 hours. However, for the time that they were trying to recover, they were offline. What does that mean for your organization? The Marriott, they had 2 breaches, but the one that they were more popular for was the one in 2018. They had a rat, not like the traditional rat in your homes, a remote access Trojan that sat in their company for 4 years. 4 years. Now that rat gives the hacker the access to do whatever they please on your organization. So they could execute a code, they could start exfiltrating files, and I think 500 million records were taken as a result. Florida, Riviera Beach, Lake City, they were compromised last year. There's a string of attacks that happened in Florida. Ransomware shut down Riviera Beach and Lake City for quite a period. They paid $1 million in ransom just to regain their data. Baltimore City did not suffer so well. In June of 2019, ransomware shut their entire city down for the better part of 3 months. They estimated the total cost of the repair to be $18 million. Macy's, have you shopped at Macy's last year in the early part of October? An unauthorized code was inputted in their checkout page, which captured all the credit card details for a little over 2 weeks. If you've shopped there, your credit card has already been compromised. And you would have more than likely gotten an email from Macy. We would say to you, change that credit card if you have shopped there. Next slide, please. Now, in the previous slide, you have seen large organizations with large budgets, but there are small companies that don't have the budgets to recover. And that's why we've always predicated and we've always asked companies to ensure you have adequate protection in place. Brookside, ENT and Hearing, they closed their operations after an attack. In April of 2019, they were hacked. Their entire files were corrupted and they were asked to pay $6,500 in ransom. Now, the two doctors decided they're not paying the ransom. And truth be told, that's what that's a position we take as well. There is no guarantee that your files will be decrypted and the key sent to you for you to continue your normal operations. But more than that, you are not in a position to remediate and fix those issues after paying the ransom. So they've decided, rightly so, to not pay, but they had no protection in place. They sat for 2 weeks waiting on clients to come in the waiting room to say to them, we are unable to serve you, we are closing our operation. This should not be you. Next slide, please. Now, what are some of the required actions as a result? One, we are asking that you determine your company's current cybersecurity maturity level. Where are you? You need to include your senior managers as a part of the conversation. You need to get buy-in from the board level and the SMT if at all possible, especially as a CIO. Unfortunately, when a company has an attack, the first person that is called is the CIO. And in a lot of instances, their jobs are literally on the line when there is a breach. Don't let this be you. Identify key resources that are required to fill your cybersecurity gap within the organization and fill them. Fight for those resources. There are over 200,000 jobs that need to be filled across the United States and in Europe. You need to start looking early if there is a cybersecurity gap for resources in your organization. Take an inventory of all your assets and determine the value of those assets. Prioritize those that are critical and put the proper protection in place for those assets. If you have not implemented a cybersecurity policy that governs access privileges on and off your network, do that now. And especially if you are on this call and you have asked your workers, your staff to work from home, if you do not have this in place, this is something you need to do right now. Decide what cybersecurity measures you need and want to manage in-house versus outsourcing. You may not have the budget. It may be cheaper. It may be more inexpensive for you to operate at an OPEX level as opposed to what we call a CAPEX level, to spend that money monthly as opposed to spend it all at once. If you need to outsource, there are a lot of companies out there that can help you. Next slide, please. And finally, a quote from Robbie Sinclair, Head of Security for NSW Australia. Security is always excessive until it is never enough. Thank you, guys. Over to you, Jermaine.
Thank you, Kevin.